Okay, let's talk about securing Windows 10. We've covered this is the last A of the AAA of we've authenticated people. We know who they are. We've authorized them. We're trying to set up borders on what they can and cannot do. And now we're going to audit things. We're going to record and log as much as possible and try as a final means of security. If someone's able to get through our security auditing will allow us to figure out what went wrong and if something did indeed go wrong. So let's talk about that. All right, I'm going to click present and we'll get started. So the first thing we got to talk about is local policies. So policies are going to be how we enable a lot of the logging in Windows. So local policies are for enabling and disabling features, auditing system access, assigning user rights, and configuring specific security options. So there's two types of local policies. There's security, which you can access using the SecPol Microsoft Council, and there's also the group, which you can edit with gpedit.microsoft Council or MSC. So if you type policy in the start menu, you'll see the two of the apps up here. Let me bring over we'll bring over my virtual Windows 10 here. Let it blink for a minute, auto resolve itself, and there we go. So if I type in policy, this is always a little bit of an adventure because of, here's the local security policy. I'm not seeing the group policy. And of course, I can always bulletproof it and just do the Control R to run group policy. So there's a local security policy. And with this latest version of Windows, or my particular version, for whatever reason, they're not showing me both. So if I type in group policy, let's see if I can force its hand. Edit group policy will pop up here. All right. And I believe that's the MSC. I think. There it is. Yep, that's the MSC. So there's a group policy editor. Okay. I can also get to those by, again, hitting Control R. Let me close those out. If I hit Control R, I'm going to get the run window, or I should at least, or I think it's getting intercepted by my host operating system. So I'll bring it up manually. And again, if I do gpedit.msc, it's pathed, so it will pop up. And then security policy was secpol.msc. And it should pop up. So there you go. So those are the two policies. So what's the difference between the two? Security policy, we're going to do right here. We'll start with group policy. Group policy is just essentially in general features and settings. Let's go to it real quick. So here's security policy. This is actually very similar to what you see in Active Directory if you push down policy changes in Active Directory. So if I click on Windows settings, for example, we can see here I can make changes to the DNS server, add my own DNS stuff. I can add some policy-based QoS, administrative templates. We can play with the start menu, various settings right here, disable context menus and start menu, that type of thing. So group policy editor is meant for kind of local settings and features. All right. Security policy is used for auditing, which we'll be interested here. Certificate policies, firewall settings, password and software restrictions. We've already played with that a little bit when we did authentication. It was a little awkward whether or not to put it in here, so we did an authentication. And we played with password policies, and that's under security policy. So we've already played with security policy in the lab, or at least you should have. So we have local versus domain. So just again, to reiterate, local policies only affect the local machine, obviously users or currently logged in user. In a domain environment, the domain controller can push down changes to the group policy, which is very powerful. This is why Active Directory is in every business and in many businesses, just about every business that you can find, because of you're able to essentially administer various PCs through Active Directory. A lot of that is changing the group policy. So this is a point I just want to make. It's kind of a preview if you're going to take Windows 2. If you don't take Windows 2, this is an important concept. Any corporate environment where you have Active Directory running on the network, just know this: that policy, the group policy is applied by the local PC applies it first. The site container in Active Directory, so the entire site has a policy that's applied. The domain itself, so there could be multiple domains within a site. Then the domain policy is applied, and finally the OU, which is the organizational unit. That's the unit that contains all the, usually the PCs for a department. We try to make it department-based or political-based. We try to match the political or workflow of a company. So that means that makes the OU the most powerful and local the least powerful. So the analogy I usually say is if you're think of policies as have the remote control, right? So we're having a family movie night, we're sitting down, we're watching TV, and we all have the remote control. And I say, listen, everyone gets to pick what they're going to watch. However, it's going to go first. It's going to go youngest to oldest. So I give it to my son first. He flips on something. I give it to my daughter. She flips on something. She gives it to my wife. She flips on something, and then finally I get to flip it to the Celtics or whatever I want to watch, right? So that makes me an unfair advantage, right? So the OU policy being applied last is powerful. And so what's going to happen is there's a default policy setting. If there's a change, that change is what gets saved. It gets saved as like a file, and it gets changed on the local hard drive. So the local drive first goes through, and any defaults gets flipped over. So let's just say there's a light switch. Let's do a basic setting. So we do have pin apps to start when installed. All right. So let's say this setting is a on or off type situation, right? So the default here is, I would actually think that's, well, the default is not configured. But if I was to change it, change the setting, that is what it would save to the file, right? To then change that policy on boot, right? So on boot, and that's an important concept, by the way, it's when you boot up that the policy changes. The local policies are applied, and then if you're on Active Directory, the site policies will then get applied, domain will get applied. Again, you could have the same light switch being switched on and off and on and off, and finally OU would have the ultimate say on whether or not that light switch is on or off. All right, easiest way to look at it. Security practice that if properly, so that's the bare basic on policies. We'll play with those in the lab, so maybe you get a little bit more familiar with them. All right, so let's talk about event logging. It's a security practice that, if properly reviewed, helps detect undetected security breaches, right? There are a number of security breaches that are detected by audits, right? By security audits, by reviewing the logs. So it is important to log, right? Under local security policy, one can set up windows to log when certain events occur, basic versus advanced. So here's our local security policy. Let me bring it up. That is the group, and here's security. So not account policies. We already played with that. So where am I looking for? Well, there's audit policy configuration. Is that the one I want? Well, here's log on, log off on various items, right? So privilege use is a big one. We're going to play with that a little bit. I think the big thing we're going to play with is actually system access. But this is so this is where you can sit there and actually enable tracking. All right. Account log-on, you can who logs in, when they log in. Account management, who's changing, adding users, taking away users. Detailed tracking, which is app activity. Object access, which we'll do in the lab. Policy change, whenever someone changes the policy, right? That'd be good to know. System events like reboots or unscheduled shutdowns. And privilege escalation, whenever someone uses that second admin token, like we talked about in authentication. All right. So that's all I really have on that, right? So just keep in mind, let me go back. And just keep in mind that this is what we're going to be using in the lab to set up some local auditing policies. Auditing is a way that we can track what users are doing on the machine. And then we're going to look at the system event logger, which will allow us to view the logs. So, all right, that's all I have for this lecture, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.